I know I'm about to do all the things y'all have already done, but bear with me. I'll be right back. I'm just gonna grab it. Okay. I literally exactly the same thing as you did before, I'm sure. I did. No, literally, same thing for me too.
Thank you.
Somebody else to come. Sorry about that.
No, thank you.
All right, if you don't mind, you know how to get back in here. I need to put the PDH thing up real quick. You good? Oh my gosh, I click every other little. Let's just do it. Yep. Jeez Louise. All right. Live and learn. Yeah, mine does too. Mine does too. Okay, you have Misery Loves Company. So, all right, we got your thing here. We are all set. And I'm just going to introduce this.
Yeah, copy the case, and then I think what we're going to probably be working on is there being like ongoing communication and geographic areas covered by the bridge guy and the air guy and the structure team. We're going to probably like try to say, hey, there'll be communication. You know what I mean? So, yeah, there's going to be different.
I don't know.
All right, we're going to get started here. This is the final session for the day. I have the QR code for your PDHs on the screen, and it is also taped to the wall, and at the end I'll put it up for another few minutes for folks to get a picture of this. So I'm going to turn this Cool Projects U-4437 grade separation over to you, Chad. All right, let me get this going. Perfect.
All right. Good afternoon. My name is Chad Hennett. I'm the Deputy Division Construction Engineer for Division 5, which is primarily right here in the Raleigh area. So I was asked to do a presentation on cool projects. I'll start off by saying, yes, this is a cool project, but I'd like to consider it a challenging project. In the end, it will be cool. If you're familiar with the Raleigh area, this project is about 10 minutes from here. If you live in the Raleigh area or you've ever been to the NC State Fairgrounds, you know exactly where this project is at. This is the Blue Ridge Road, Hillsborough Road grade separation. So with that, what I was going to do is I'm going to try to walk through some of the design considerations, purpose and needs of how we got to the plan that we ultimately designed and are building through right now. And then as we talk through some of those challenges and some of those thoughts, we'll move into the construction phase and we'll talk about what we've started constructing so far, keeping in mind that we're still constructing this project as it is today. So, a little bit of the project background and how the final roadway bridge geometry was determined will be part of what we go through right here. So you got the project planning background, you got the project design, utility relocation, and then also the project construction. So the project study. The need for this project, proposed project, was identified in 2001 by the City of Raleigh. This was done in conjunction with the consideration of the Triangle Transit Authority light rail station on Hillsborough Street across from the fairgrounds. The thought process was the light rail station in this area would make it generated as a transit-oriented development, and Blue Ridge Road would, its level of service at this intersection would greatly degrade. The adopted study was recommended that the feasibility of Blue Ridge Road grade separation over or under the rail corridor with the connecting roads to Hillsborough Street be evaluated by the department. The NCDOT added this project, U-4437, to the statewide Transportation Improvement Program in 2002 and began evaluating the project. So the project study area, this is just a big map here. You can see that we've got the probably a little left center there is the fairgrounds. See U-4437 shown right there kind of in the middle of the map. 440 runs up and down over to the right there just to kind of get you oriented. The first step in defining this project study area, which encompasses Wade Avenue, 440, Western Boulevard, and its offset to the west, Youth Center Drive. As I'm sure most of you are aware, Blue Ridge Road serves several major destinations, including Rex Hospital, the North Carolina Museum of Art, NCSU Carter Finley Stadium, PNC Arena, and Hillsborough Street is an important roadway leading to North Carolina State University and the downtown Raleigh area. In addition to all those that I've named, the fairgrounds and NCSU's vet school are situated right in the middle of this project. On one side you have the NC State Fairgrounds, and on the other side you have the NCSU vet school, and they're both major stakeholders that we deal with on a daily basis while we're working through the planning and the construction of this project. Another component is the North Carolina Railroad. So as if I didn't add enough stakeholders to this whole conglomerate in this project right here, we've got the North Carolina Railroad. Now, I didn't point that out, but you see where U-4437 is here on the sheet. If you move probably about an inch below that, you have a 200-foot corridor that is owned by North Carolina Railroad. Not only is it owned by North Carolina Railroad, this corridor also houses CSX for one track, NS for the other track. So we've got 3 rail entities in one corridor, and that corridor dates back to the 1850s. So it's not something that popped up yesterday. So looking at that, there's a lot of stakeholders in this area, and it's not like when I started off with the department, we'd go build a bridge out in the middle of nowhere and nobody'd bother you, right? Now we're right in the middle of everybody, and we've got major stakeholders to our left, to our right, everywhere we look. All right, so the next thing was the project purpose. So as we defined the project purpose, it was a necessity to secure the federal highway approval. It justifies the expected outcome of the public expenditures and allows decisions to be defensible. So the primary purposes of the proposed project are to reduce the congestion of the intersection at Hillsborough Street and Blue Ridge Road, to reduce the number of accidents at the intersection, to reduce train-related conflicts with vehicles and pedestrians, and to address the pedestrian deficiencies at and approaching the project intersection. So right here is basically looking at what we walked into for the project, the way it was originally set up. You've got Hillsborough Road running left to right, Blue Ridge Road running up and down, Barrel Road on the other side of the railroad, and then, of course, I mentioned the railroad in there as well. So with no improvements to the intersection of Hillsborough Street with Blue Ridge, this project by 2030 would have queues that would exceed 1,400 feet and a delay of several movements that would exceed 5 minutes during the AM and PM peak hours. The project queues, the projected queues do not include the approximate 22 daily train movements, which further degrades the intersection. In its original configuration, the intersection is one of the most complicated signal systems in the state because of its railroad preemptions and 2 full movement intersections within 250 feet of each other. Of the accidents reported at the project intersection and along these roadway sections during the 3-year period, rear-end accidents were the most common accident type. Rear-end accidents typically occur when unexpected traffic queues force sudden stops and drivers are distracted. This is indicative of congestion and driver frustration in this area. This is actually, this is pre-project. The fairgrounds is up on your top left-hand corner, so you can kind of see the intersections we're talking about here. Barrow had a signalized intersection. Hillsborough had a signalized intersection. And then you had the railroad sandwiched in between the 2 of them. The NCDOT Rail Division Rail Grade Separation Guideline included an exposure index to guide recommendations for grade separating highway and rail crossings. The exposure index is the product of the number of trains per day and the projected average daily highway traffic at the end of the design period. According to the guidelines, separations should be constructed in urban areas when the exposure index is 30,000 or more. The exposure index for Blue Ridge Road was at 526,000. I think it was time for an upgrade. Also, the rail corridor is also designated as a U.S. DOT National High-Speed Corridor. The corridor extends from Washington, D.C. through Richmond, Virginia, Raleigh and Charlotte, North Carolina, down to Atlanta. As you can see here, impacts over here on the right have existed for a while in this area. This is a 1947 picture of the railroad crossing at Barrel Road. It was approximately 1/10 of a mile east of its present-day location. You can look in the distance back there. That's the fairgrounds back there. Trust me, you probably can't see it, but it is. But drivers were still having a problem coming through this intersection back in 1947, as you can tell by the car that's wrapped around the telephone pole. So, pedestrians. Pedestrians were a huge consideration during this design phase. As we stated earlier, it was a problem in this area. Sidewalks and other infrastructures did not adequately support the traffic, the pedestrian traffic adjacent to the NC State Fairgrounds on the Hillsborough Street side of Blue Ridge Road. The NC State Fairgrounds is the primary pedestrian traffic generator for this study area. A 2009 pedestrian count revealed that 15,000 people cross Hillsborough Blue Ridge intersection daily to go to the fair. Now, the fair is not the only event that the fairgrounds holds. They have over 600 events annually. And so when you have the amount of people that are coming through there, and you notice you got the fairgrounds, all this kind of stuff, we've got a problem. We've got people crossing, there's not enough pedestrian access, and then we throw in Carter Finley, and then we throw in PNC, and what we learned is there's a lot of people that park all the way down here and a walk all the way up the hill to Carter Finley or PNC. So there's more than 9 miles of public roadway in the network of the study, but less than 2 miles of sidewalk. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there with the pedestrian traffic. So the next step was to determine the influencing factors for the project. So here we're going to talk about those project influences. The main constraints and issues used to develop the different alternatives for this project are listed here. Raleigh was calling for a transportation concept that enhances connections between the area destinations through a network of walking paths. The character and aesthetics were a big consideration in this area, which attracts visitors from across the state and region. Citizen stakeholders and stakeholder action committees were formed and actively participated in the planning process. Historic buildings on the NC State Fairground property played an important role in defining the area's character and were actually protected under the Historic Preservation Act. Several alternatives were considered and evaluated, all of which, we haven't included in this presentation, but what I've included here are the top ones that we did take or that were looked at, and we'll take a look at a few of those. But the ones that were not looked at, they just were impractical. So let's talk a little bit about historic property. Not sure if you knew this, but the educational building that's right there on the corner, historic property. It's the one that has the little stucco, it has the stucco finish to it, and they call it the old educational building. Dorton Arena, historic property. There's a lot of historic property here, and that decided a lot to what we could do as well as what we had to do. So we'll talk about some of the considerations or some of the alternatives were considered here. One was just close the intersection. But that was not a viable solution because what that would end up doing is rerouting all the traffic back to I-440 and just, clog up that interstate there as well. Another alternative was lower the railroad. That's easier said than done. But due to what it would take to lower that railroad to get up under us, there just wasn't enough room to take the railroad all the way back and redo that. So that was just not a viable option as well. So that gets us into an over and under concept. So one of the early thoughts was that we would do an over concept with a roundabout. Now, if you're familiar with the study area, the lower left-hand corner is the fairgrounds. Just above that, you'll see the vet school, 440 heading up that way. But what this would do was this would basically take a bridge over Hillsborough, kind of offset to the side, but then you would have this service road that kind of come down, use a roundabout right about the vet school entrance, and then kind of dumped you back out or brought you off of Hillsborough Road. This would actually have been a real easy one from a project phasing and staging concept, just because we could build everything offline and then we could come back and put everybody back on it and then demo the old. However, you can see how much real estate there it takes up from MCSU. It didn't quite meet their master plan. It left them a little bit uneasy of how they were going to have their entrances coming in. And then we have a bridge stuck up in the air, which brought us back to the historical stuff. It kind of blocked view of the fairgrounds. So then there was another over concept. This is basically just taking and putting the bridge right where the road is. You would have the access road coming down to the side. Great plan, but visual impacts, especially were concerned in this area given the regional and statewide attraction that we have here, as well as the historic property and the proximity to the project intersection. I learned a very valuable word in this whole process, and that's called viewshed. If you don't know about viewshed, it impacts a lot, and when you get into historical properties, it basically dictates what you can and what you can't do. And so this one was basically tossed out. And this has been real nice. I mean, this is what we could have had. We could have had a bridge going over, you'd had your service road coming up to the side, but you can see that would have left the fairgrounds down in a hole. The historic property here on the corner, you wouldn't really see it. It wouldn't have been that sight line coming in or the sight line looking out wouldn't have never been the same. So looking at those, that kind of drove us to the selective alternative, which is taking Blue Ridge up under Hillsborough, up under the railroad, and up under Barrel. So this is just kind of an overlay here. A highlighted line there kind of shows it. You can see the impacts that we would have. We go back up to Trinity Road. We've got our access road coming down to the top, and then you're going up under we're building 3 bridges, basically, in this scenario. We're not creating a tunnel, but in the end, it'll kind of look like a tunnel because of the proximity of the bridges to each other. Here's some of the renderings that were taken early on based off of the selective alternative. The top one in the left-hand corner would be a sight line looking from the fairgrounds parking lot. And then the other ones will be kind of aerial images. You can see the one looking on the bottom, the view from the north. That kind of gives you a perspective of if you're coming from the Western Boulevard intersection headed up, kind of what you're seeing as you're heading into that area. It kind of looks like you're going through a tunnel, but trust me, it'll be 3 different bridges in there. They're just really close together. So with that gets us through all of the design considerations and how we got to the over-under and what we're practically building out there today, which gets us into the construction. This is the part I like. So when you hear about the U-4437 project, probably one of the first things you hear is this is a design-build project. So what does design-build mean? So the department has 2 different modes of delivering a project. One is bid build and one is design build. In a bid build, the department develops the plans, the contractor bids on the plans, the best bids selected, the selected bidder will then build off of what we give them. In a design build, it's a little bit different concept. The department will actually, they provide the concept and the criteria, and then the department selects the best value proposal from a short list of contractors. The contractors will then perform both design and construction, which can be more innovative and can reduce construction time, overall cost, and impacts to the motoring public. For a design build project to be utilized, there's a couple of criteria that's looked at. Projects where the design can be constructed, design and construction needs to be expedited for the public, or if there's emergency projects that we need to get out there quickly, or if there's a project with a complex constructability or traffic phasing issue, or if there's a project that affords the opportunity for innovation, or if there's just something unusual that does not lend themselves to a normal bid build process. This project right here has complex constructability, traffic phasing aspects that made the design build delivery method the best option. So during this portion of the presentation, we're going to talk about what does it take to build this project. I mean, it looks pretty simple on the plans, but what does it actually take? I see some of my familiar faces in the room that have kind of been side by side with me the whole way. So I appreciate their help through this. So what does it take to construct a grade separation intersection with multiple roads and railroads involved? This type of project requires multiple phases, construction operations, as well as extensive coordination. The phases we've dealt with to date are utility relocation, initial roadway construction, maintenance of traffic, bridge construction, roadway widening, temporary track construction, all involve stakeholder coordination. And you say, okay, well, we do that every day. I don't even think this project's a mile long. I mean, from start to finish on either direction. If you would go east and west, I don't think you go a mile. If you go north and south, I don't think you go a mile. But we're doing all of that in a small area. All right, so the first thing we had to do was identify and relocate any utilities that were in the way. This is a big, messy drawing right here, but it is the hard facts and the truth of what we encountered out there on the project. In the Hillsborough Blue Ridge Road corridor, we had Duke Power, Dominion Energy, AT&T, Verizon, MCI, Segra, Crown Castle, Charter, Spectrum, Raleigh Fiber, ITS, CSX Fiber, CenturyLink, City Water, City Sewer, Toledo, all within that intersection, the existing intersection. How they got there, I don't know. But what I did find out is if AT&T had anything, it was in here. I mean, they had multiple upon multiple things in this area. I mean, we were still finding stuff that we had to relocate out there. So this plan sheet right here shows all the utilities we had to relocate. You're probably used to a utility sheet, but all of them are represented here by a different color. Since this was a design build project, our contractor's scope of work included the coordination of the utility relocations. They provided their own personnel along with a utility designer to design and ensure the utilities were coordinated and relocated. The coordination consisted of working with the utility owners to find a home to ensure that they were relocated in a manner that would not impact the project schedule. The challenge with having this many entities is trying to find a home for all of them. Where do you put them? The first initial thought is we'll just put them all in the ground. Well, that would be easier said than done, but remember, we're going up under Hillsborough, we're going up under the railroad, we're going up under Barrow. We're going to be, Blue Ridge Road is going to be about 30 foot down in the ground. So to relocate all these people down into the ground, now you're talking about putting them deeper down into the ground, which now becomes harder for them to get to in an event they need to come back to them later. So putting them all in here and burying them deep wasn't an option, which led us to find other options that we could find. So the blue line here actually shows where we placed all of the utilities. The main line that runs the longest would be Blue Ridge Road. We did try to place as many of those utilities within that area as we could. However, we were limited on real estate. we couldn't place it all in there. Some of them were aerial, some of them were underground. That led us to looking for other options. We came up with a second option, which was added to the first one, which is it comes down at the bottom, takes off to the left, and goes back up again. That's what we call our utility corridor. We were able to use some NCDOT property, which actually runs behind a stakeholder in this area, and we were able to put some more utilities in that area. And just to tell you, just looking at that area in itself had Dominion, Duke Power, Segra, Crown Castle, Spectrum, AT&T, Lumen, and the City of Raleigh Fiber. So, that's just a lot of people that we had to relocate and a lot of people that we had to find places for them to go. And, not only just for them somewhere to go, but they had to be somewhere permanent because we didn't have a lot of room to shift them here, shift them back over there. But the one thing I wanted to bring to attention right here is, remember where I said the railroad was? The railroad kind of runs right there in the middle of the page. Every one of these utilities had to cross that railroad, which brought in a different dynamic. Once you talk about going across the railroad with a utility, now you start getting into different stuff that, quite honestly, I've never dealt with before, but it does get a little bit difficult. From this picture right here, you can see how many critical utilities and drainage pipes that were needed to relocate just in the intersection that crossed the railroad. We've kind of got them highlighted there. This is actually the Blue Ridge-Hillsborough Road intersection. There were others, but these are just the main critical ones we had to get out of our way so that we could actually start some of the major construction. Back to dealing with the railroad. So for any utility or NCDOT drainage pipe to cross a rail corridor, whether it existed there previously or not. If it existed there previously and you now got to relocate it, now you have to go through what we call an occupancy agreement. So, the railroad's right-of-way is unique, and it involves 3 different railroads. The corridor is owned by NCRR, and then you have Norfolk Southern running one track, CSX running the other track. Okay, so what's that mean? Basically, each individual railroad required us to have an occupancy agreement to exist up under their track or their property. So right now we've had 3 occupancy agreements for every utility and every drainage pipe the NCDOT put in this area. And I say, okay, what does that mean? It takes time. It takes time, it takes coordination, and it takes a lot of communication. For any utility that wanted to cross, they had to get their own occupancy agreement. But it didn't just stop at the occupancy agreement. That just gave them the right to be there. That didn't give them the right to go put the line in. That doesn't give us the right to go put the drainage pipe in. Now we have to go through a means and method. How are you going to do the work? Give us a step-by-step of how the work is going to be constructed. And then once you have a means and method that's been approved by the railroad, now you have to have meetings on site. You have to have pre-activity meetings. You got to schedule railroad flagmen to be there. No operation can happen within the railroad right away unless it's been scheduled with the railroad and you have a flagger on site to observe the work and let you know when the train's coming. So like I said, it's just not going out there and building because it looks good on the plans. There's a lot of coordination that takes place, a lot of weekly meetings, bi-weekly meetings, stuff like that. So I said we were going to talk about some challenges earlier, and we did run into a couple of challenges along the way. MCI actually used the railroad corridor as a protected corridor to run one of their lines. They actually ran it through the CSX maintained and operated portion of the corridor. But the problem with their line was it wasn't up under the existing tracks, but it was up under where we needed to build detour tracks. And they didn't want it up under anything that was going to be train related. They just wanted to be in the corridor so that nobody could technically find where their line was and disturb it. So that led to a lot of coordination and a lot of effort to get their line moved out of the way. And you say, well, that's easy, just move it out of the way. Well, part of that process was we had to design and build the detour tracks and get all that stuff going. So that took a lot of effort from our design build team in trying to figure out, okay, where are we going to put the temp tracks? We have to figure out exactly where all our ditches are going to go. And so originally what they started out doing was going 4 foot down the outside of that, just burying that line and getting it out of the way. And then they said, well, what are you going to do when you get to the intersection? We're going to build a bridge. We're going to lower the road. So we had some extensive coordination to work with the design build team. And really what that revolved around was, in order to get this line in, it was buried 4 foot, but about the time you got to the Blue Ridge Road, Hillsborough intersection where the railroad crossed, we were somewhere between 77 and 78 foot in the ground with that MCI line. And that's just to try to miss the bridge footings of the bridge that we were going to build in that area. So there was a lot of coordination, there was a lot of effort to make sure that we got this line in its place, because the one thing we were told was once we move it, we don't want it touched, we don't want it disturbed. You know, we need it out of the way and you know, so forth. So another problem we ran into was with Dominion Energy. So we had to take Dominion Energy and bore across the railroad tracks. And boring across the existing railroad tracks, this is just a cross section of part of their means and method that they had to put together and show where everything was. We were boring across the existing tracks, and then there's kind of a no man's land over there to the right where the temp tracks were going to go. And we're boring through there, and all of a sudden we lost the bore. And when I say we lost the bore, we don't know where that bore went. The last depth I think they were at was probably 25 to 30 some foot deep in the ground trying to find the bore head or the bore pipe. And to this day, we don't know where it went. It's out there somewhere, I'm sure. But basically what happened was we hit a bad pocket of material up under where the temp tracks were going to go. And if you've ever been around a boring operation, if you know that pocket of material is there, it's kind of easier to start guiding that bore head through that area. But when you don't know it's there and you start going full crowd through that material, it hits that bad pocket and it's gone, out of sight. It may come up, it may go down, it may go left, it may go right, who knows. So we hit a bad pocket of material. So now we had our means and method of how to put this line in here. We had everything approved, but that was for the plan to bore it in this location. If we were left with an option of now we got to put this line somewhere else. To start that whole process over again, we would have had to start over with a new means and method, the new meetings, all this other stuff. So to try to save project schedule, the department got to work with Dominion Energy, and we come to an agreement that we would run this line in a different location, and we convinced Dominion, let's take it down Barrel Road. And with some Dominion magic, I don't know what it is, but they were able to tie in down at Powell and make the line work as if they had crossed over the railroad. I would say in that situation, we probably saved easily 30 to 60 days just on review time of a means and method, because, you know, having to change the game plan, that just changed everything. All right, so once the utilities are out of the way, we can start on an access road. That would be represented by this colored line that kind of looks like the squiggly little snake, or what we like to call the jug handle. Why do we call it a jug handle? Well, it looks just like a jug handle. Right? But anyways, one of the first steps we had to do is to redirect the traffic around the Blue Ridge Hillsborough work area in order to start bridge construction at the Hillsborough Street. With the capacity at this intersection, this helps us to maintain the flow of traffic. It also prevents other areas from getting congested if this intersection was to be completely closed down. In order to expedite the work and to minimize the impacts, the jug handle was constructed to its full width. The jug handle is a key feature that is needed to carry the traffic, to and from events to the State Fairgrounds, PNC, and Carter Finley. So here in this picture, you can see the jug handles being constructed. It's over kind of on our right-hand center page there. In this picture, Hillsborough Street was actually closed for the bridge construction work of Hillsborough, which you can see right there in the middle of the page. This aerial gives a good look of how the access road moves traffic around the work area. This was not only vital for the use during construction, but will also serve as a connection for Hillsborough and Blue Ridge in the final configuration. So, maintenance of traffic, one of our biggest hurdles. In road construction, it's the biggest component of our work. In office, often it is our biggest hurdle. This is a snapshot, Google image that I just pulled, but you can see the different movements coming in, the amount of people sitting there. We've got a train in the middle. But when you have this many cars to deal with at this intersection, the focus becomes how do we get the traffic off of us so we can do the work, and how do we get the motoring public to where they need to go. So there's a maintenance of traffic. Again, we did look in this scenario here. It's a little bit hard to tell, but Blue Ridge is running where the crosshatched area is. Hillsborough is running up and down. We did look at trying to put a detour in, which would kind of salvage the over the railroad track situation here. There was just a lot of things that made this difficult. One is, remember we talked about the bridge construction. The bridge construction would have been up in the top right-hand corner. You can see, or maybe you can't, but you can tell the limits of what I've got shown here would have been how far we would have had to go back just to make the tie. And the reason being is the railroad track sat about 5 foot above Hillsborough Road. And so in order to come up and over and then back down, that caused a lot of wedging of asphalt that would have had to gone out either direction of Hillsborough, which would have caused a lot of heartburn in how to get this in, how to maintain traffic. Now you've got this wedging going across that kind of slows down the bridge construction of Hillsborough. A lot of things going on here, and then you throw in the mix of you're crossing the railroad in another location, and the railroad really didn't like that. I'll just be honest. They weren't a fan of this situation that we had right here, and who blames them? They didn't really like the crossing we had. Introducing a new crossing, new rail arms, and a 200-foot corridor just made it dangerous, and is just something they weren't willing to entertain. This led us to closing the crossing after the 2022 State Fair. This was done so that the work for the detour track construction could begin, as well as building the Hillsborough Bridge, the Railroad Bridge, and the Barrel Bridge over Blue Ridge. This right here is just our actual detour plan that we used. Now that you've got Blue Ridge closed, how do you get the motoring public around you? The sheet here just outlines all the different detours. The routes that are in red are for Blue Ridge. The routes that are in blue for Hillsborough. But you can see there's a lot of connectivity in this area. There's a lot of signs, but we had to put detour routes out. And this just shows the amount of work and planning had to go into this with the signing, message boards, and everything that entails. All right, so the Hillsborough Bridge construction was our next step. You can see that we built the jug handle down here. The kind of blue area is the Blue Ridge right there, our shaded area right there, phase 1 of Hillsborough Bridge. So we closed everything down, and we started on that phase 1 construction. Here's phase 1. Looks kind of weird. Looks like we're building a bridge right on top of the ground. And actually we are, but you got to remember in this picture here, Hillsborough Street stays at its same elevation, right? It probably goes up a foot or two. Blue Ridge Road, which is where your mats are down there, that's dropping down approximately 30 foot up under that bridge. This will be similar to the bridge that we'll build for the railroad and Barrel itself. But here's the bridge after it was constructed, still sitting a couple of feet off the ground. Hillsborough Street was reopened prior to the NC State football game on September 16, 2023, with traffic on the new structure. I mentioned a while ago that this was phase 1 We still have 3 more girders to add to this bridge. However, the reason we cannot add those girders to this bridge now is because of the temp rail has slid over closer to Hillsborough, and to put the 3, we just get into that safety zone, and part of that bridge kind of falls inside the railroad's right of way as well. So you kind of have to work. We got to get the temp rail back over to the permanent, then we can come in and add the 3 extra girders. Okay, so this right here is an aerial of Hillsborough and Blue Ridge intersection today. You can see the bridge right there in the middle. You can see the jug handle comes down. If you take a good hard look, and we'll see it here in a minute, we'll look again, you can see how that bridge would make more sense if it widened out about 3 more girders. It would kind of match what we're trying to build in there. Luckily enough, due to the width that we were trying to going to widen out Hillsborough to here, we were able to do a lot of this work during the day, and we were able to work with the contractor and doing some traffic shifts. Since we had a lot of roadway width out there, we were able to shift traffic around, still maintaining a 1 lane in each direction, and it kind of expedited the work, which actually helped us to get this portion completed prior to the 2023 State Fair, which was important to the fairgrounds because it helped to open up some of the pedestrian access that we would have along Hillsborough for people coming in, as well as parking along the edges. So in this one right here, see if I can get this to play. This right here is just some drone footage we took of the actual Hillsborough Blue Ridge intersection after the widening. You can see the bridge that we constructed there. This is the jug handle that comes down and ties in. You can see how traffic is utilizing that to make traffic come through the area. You can see our temp tracks off to the side inside that rail corridor, and this is headed back to 440 off in the distance right there. All right, temporary track construction. This is what I was talking about a while ago. You can see it kind of makes sense. We've got the rails that are sitting down to the bottom. I don't know if you can tell the 4 dark corners right there. That's actually some sheet piling we had to put in. But you can see how we've got to widen Hillsborough Street out just a little bit more. But in order to stay away from some clear zones, we got to make sure that track has been moved back. And this is during construction when we're trying to get the temporary tracks ready for the NS subcontractor to come in and start their work. Basically, the shoring that we put in here is just to help us so that we can excavate out for both the railroad bridge and the Blue Ridge, Hillsborough over Blue Ridge on the other side. It just protects the temp tracks. You don't see them in this picture, but where that white truck is where the temporary tracks were planned to go. So by putting in the shoring, that just keeps everything solidified so that we can do our work that's in there. Temporary track design, a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of communication, a lot of meeting. A lot of stuff went into this for, a lot of stuff that you don't even think about, but drainage. How are you going to drain the railroad's property? Or how are you going to get the water off of them? How are you going to make sure that you've, got all your supers and stuff built? And I mean, it's kind of weird. I mean, I don't design railroad. It just seems simple just to put the tracks down, let the rail run on it, but they actually have super elevation to them going through the curve. You got to have, everything's got to be built just right. Very minor room for some tolerances there. So a lot of stuff has to go into this, but like I said, coordination on a day-to-day basis is what it took to keep this thing moving. Railroad undercut, that's something we didn't plan for, but something we definitely found. Remember the bad pocket of material that we found for the Dominion bore? After that Dominion bore was discovered, after we lost the bore and we discovered that bad pocket of material, led to us having to evaluate the whole railroad corridor. And when I say evaluate, we had the NCDOT actually brought in their geotechnical section. We ended up having to run a geotechnical investigation through the temp track area. And then as a result of that, we actually had to come up with a signed and sealed undercut design. And so it wasn't, you know, the typical way we would build roads. Let's just find a hard spot, we'll stop there, we'll bridge it with some material, and we'll keep moving. No, we had to have a method of how we were going to put this in, means and method. And the biggest thing that we had to think about here is now you can see it in the background is the existing tracks. Where the drill rig is where we were putting the temp track. So anything you did was going to potentially jeopardize the existing tracks. So shoring had to be thought about there. Only could excavate what we could put back in a day's time because they weren't willing to leave shoring in place. We didn't want to have to sheet pile the whole area. It gets expensive real quick, so we're using mobile trench boxes to do this. So you're talking about a 20 to 40 foot, 20-foot trench box, maybe two of them side by side, whatever you can dig out to a 5-foot depth, whatever you can compact back. That's what we were doing in a day's time frame through this whole corridor, which was a couple thousand foot long. Once we got this done, we could lead to getting our sub-ballast installation put in, which is really the scope of what our work originally intended to do. We were supposed to come in here, we were supposed to grade the track bed, and in that track bed grading, we would come in and put the sub-ballast in, and then after we put the sub-ballast in, here's just some pictures of the work that we were doing. After we got the sub-ballast put in and got it all compacted and got it, everybody feeling good from the railroad, then the railroad would actually come in and they would place the ballast on top, and then they would place the rail. After the rail was placed, then CSX would bring in their people. They would do the ties on either end. NS would bring in their people, and they did their ties on either end as well. The rail platform. So many people probably don't think about this, but we actually had a rail platform before we started work. Does anybody know where it was? It was right there in the intersection. It was right in the middle of the intersection. That was the rail platform. But that was actually, that goes away when we build this project because now there's going to be a bridge there, and then you can't offload people onto a bridge and have them walking through the corridor. So in the rail platform, we had to come up with a design, and because we have temporary tracks in there and then we're going to permanent tracks, we had to have a couple of different designs. We had to have a temporary design that met the needs for the temporary tracks, and then we had to have a final design that would meet the needs for the final. These are obviously not at the intersection. They're located a little bit more in the original picture down here. If you were to go a little bit more to the left, not quite to Dorton Arena, that's where the platform will be located. So here's a picture of the temporary platform that we actually built for the temporary track scenario. Actually, no, it wasn't. I'm sorry. This was actually a temporary platform we built for the permanent tracks. So what happened here was we couldn't get the temporary tracks in before the 2023 State Fair. You can see that we've done the best we can, but the ties weren't made. It couldn't happen. We still had to put this platform in so that Amtrak could drop off the people that were coming. They were averaging about 2,000 people a day, or expecting about 2,000 people a day per the train. So we had to come up with what they call an alternate design, which basically was an interim platform that connected to the permanent tracks. That platform was used last year. We actually had it open. Now, as we enter into the 2024 State Fair, we have the temporary tracks in place. So we couldn't leave this platform in because it was actually in the way of the temporary tracks. So now this platform was removed, the new temp tracks are in, and probably this week or next, the contractor will start work on another platform that'll, much like this one, but just slid a little bit further back so that they can use the temporary tracks. After we're done with the temporary tracks, we're going to tear this one out, and we will build a new platform that'll be located probably in the same area. It'll be a little bit more grander, and when I say platform, I'm basically talking about a surfaced area I'm not talking about, the tent is actually provided from the rail division. The fencing we put up to corral people from wandering into the railroad right away. A lot of considerations from Amtrak, CSX, and NS about when people get off that train, they want to make sure that the only place they can get to is that crosswalk. Because from that train to that crosswalk down there is NCRR property, rail corridor, and technically those pedestrians aren't supposed to be there, but if they can be corralled through fence, they're okay with that. But a lot of consideration had to be given here. A lot of talk, a lot of stuff that we had to do that has to be ADA compliant. So just a lot of things to consider here. So this is just some pictures of the rail track cutover. Like I said, our contractor did not perform this work. The NS actually did the rail work for both CSX and NS. The only thing that the different entities would do was their actual tie-ins and connections, how they actually connected back to their existing rail. So these are just some pictures of some equipment that they brought out there and showing the work that they had to do. But this was, we did have rail train traffic on the temporary tracks in December 2023, which was a major milestone for the project because now we can move the biggest hurdle we had, which was the train, out of our way so we could start doing some of the work that we needed to do. Rail coordination. So what does it take to make all this work? A lot of coordination, a lot. Plans had to be developed and provided to the railroad for their review and approval. Plans and submittal, means and method all had to be reviewed and approved by the railroad before specific operations could begin. This requires bi-weekly office meeting, bi-weekly field meetings, sometimes daily meetings between the NCDOT, the contractor, and the railroad. When the plans have been approved by the railroad and they require means and method, they basically, what they want to know is, what are you going to do? Walk me through step by step what you're going to do. And basically what they're looking for in this is, what are the major flaws, not for us, right? Not for the major flaws, but what is the major flaws that's going to interact or impact their railroad? So all they're wanting to know is what you're going to do and how it's going to negatively impact them, or if it will negatively impact them, right? That's what they're looking for in the means and method. So that's just one of the biggest hurdles that we had out there, was getting this done. You know, working next to live trains is not like maintenance of traffic for cars. We just take the cars and we put them over there on that road. They're out of our way. Easy. No, we couldn't do that for the train. They're still coming through there. And, you know, there's probably about 22 train movements a day that are moving through this project, from freight rail all the way to Amtrak passenger trains. And when they come through, they're moving. So, you know, it's definitely a different scenario here. One of the biggest utilities that we had to work with here would be a 30-inch water line. This 30-inch water line actually would run alongside of Hillsborough, and the biggest problem with Hillsborough and this water line is we're going 30 foot up under. So now this water line is in our way. So what do you do with that? We did look through some plans. We did look through some alternatives. One alternative was from the design build team, let's hang this thing on the bridge. Sounded great, looked great, but after a thorough evaluation from the city of Raleigh, they just decided this was not the best thing for their 30-inch water line. And so now we had to look for different alternatives. So this right here is just a plan of what we did. Top left-hand corner is the NC State Fairgrounds. As you can see, this water line, or maybe you can't, the water line actually was between Hillsborough and the railroad tracks. So now the temp rail tracks are closer to the water line, so that left us with a challenge there and a time crunch of having to get this water line in before we actually put the temp line over there. One of the things that was a big consideration in the beginning of how to move this water line was, and led the team to try to hang it on the bridge, was the fact that the city standards do not allow for water lines to go up under major structures. So, putting it up under the bridge, that they didn't like that. But we were able to the department was able to convince the city to let us run through this parking lot at the fairgrounds. Fairgrounds were a great, they're great partners in this project. They've helped us out a lot. They allowed us to use their parking lot to run this water line through. You will notice in this drawing that we did go up under a MSE wall that's there. But the city of Raleigh said, it's a small in nature wall. It's not that big. It doesn't carry a lot of weight. It's not a major structure. We'll allow it, but with one caveat. You have to use a special pipe. So you just can't use ductile iron pipe. So what we ended up with, we used a flex lock ball and socket pipe, or what the city referred to as forever pipe. Basically, this pipe looks like ductile iron, but when you get to the end of it, it actually has these special fittings that are made onto the end. And if you want to geek out on some pipe, what this actually helps you to do here, because it's a ball and socket type connection, if there was any settlement, what the city was saying, if there's any settlement under that wall, or if there's any settlement up under Blue Ridge, because it's so deep in the ground, we don't want to have to come back to it. This ball and socket actually allows for a little bit of movement in that pipe. So obviously it doesn't allow for a lot of movement, but it will take a little bit of movement, which made it a great alternative to help us get this in. We were able to use the ductile iron in all areas, but when we dove down to go up under the wall, and when we dove down, here's a picture during construction. So after we completed, I don't know if you can see it, I wish I had a pointer, but up in the top you can see a dark patch that goes across Hillsborough. That's where we come across from the railroad tracks with the line, came through the parking lot, dove down. You can start seeing the gravity of the depth that we're trying to get to in here. And then we came back up, and the patch that's in the lower left corner here is where we basically tied back in. We basically just boxed out around that area. Timing was crucial because we had to get this all done before the temp tracks were ready to go live, because we had to make the connection to the water line before we put the train traffic on it, to make sure that we didn't get into a trenching and shoring operation with a live train right next to us. So a lot of coordination, a lot of effort that was put into that. Just an overview of the upcoming phases. Now that we got the temporary train operational, we'll start to begin some of the excavation that's required in that area. And then we're currently working on the bridges for the railroad bridge, and then we'll have the Barrel Road Bridge that will be built after that. Talking about the excavation here, this is just some cross sections at the bridges themselves. What I will say, just to kind of give you the gravity of how much dirt we're moving in here, is it's close to 100,000 cubic yards in less than a half-mile stretch. So basically, if you're familiar with the area, from the entrance to the fairgrounds on Blue Ridge Road to just past the intersection, go about a half-mile down, and then you start carving out that chunk to dive up under, meet and grade on both ends, and you're not quite at 100,000 cubic yards, but you're getting really close. One of the first things we had to do is we had to provide an entrance for one of our larger stakeholders that I didn't mention before. They're not really a destination site, but they do provide a lot of commerce and stuff to the area. That's Gregory Pool. They're one of the largest Caterpillar dealers in the area. They actually run a 24/7 operation, because not only do they sell equipment, but they maintain equipment as well. So actually this is their entrance. We had to build them a driveway, and it had to function before we could start making the big cut. And basically this was to help get them. People come day, night. Imagine if you're a contractor, your equipment breaks down, you got to get it over to Gregory Pool to work on. They're open 24/7, so they had to have this operation open and available to them so that it didn't put a detriment on their business. So here's just a picture of the Barrel Road structure, much like the railroad structure, just a structure over top. That'll be coming in hopefully later this year. Just continued coordination here between the railroads. This is the railroad bridge. You can see it sandwiched between the Hillsborough Bridge and Barrel itself. a lot of coordination in getting this thing going, a lot of coordination in keeping it going. Just can't stress that enough. Here's another picture of Hillsborough Street. You can see, if you count the girders off there, you can see that we had 3 more. No, that is not the water line that's hanging up under there. They actually did allow us to hang the sewer line on the bridge. So the sewer line is going to be hung up on that bridge, and that's what's depicted in that drawing there. So Blue Ridge Road, this right here just shows the connection. This is the jug handle as it connects up to the fairgrounds. If you're familiar with the fairgrounds, if you know where gate 11 is, right now on Blue Ridge Road, that is roughly where the that entrance will actually close. I don't think it's actually functional anymore. The staircase that you can see, the dual staircase on the other side, that is actually the staircase that will lead you into the fairgrounds. So there'll be a 10-foot pedestrian path on the other side, and then you'll have access via this stairwell that we have here. So I got a rendering right here that I'm going to show you. There's a lot of stuff that I've talked about. There's a lot of stuff that I've mentioned. This may have it, this may not. The real purpose behind this is everybody wants to know, well, what's it going to feel like to drive down Hillsborough Road or drive down Blue Ridge Road and go up under all these bridges. So the intent behind this video is just to kind of give you a feel of maybe not the bridges, maybe not, it's not a tunnel, it's bridges, but it's kind of what you're going to feel coming from Western Boulevard as you're coming up Blue Ridge Road. You got Barrel Road that we're going under there. You'll have the railroad tracks there. You'll have Hillsborough right there. This will be how you actually access Blue Ridge and Hillsborough once we put the bridges in effect. All right, well, that is a lot of information, I know, in a short amount of time. I apologize for running over just a little bit, but I appreciate you sticking around to the end. Any questions? I planned it perfectly. Y'all ready to go?
Appreciate it. All right, well, thanks so much, Chad. All right, everybody, thanks so much for attending. I'm going to put the QR code for your PDHs up for those who may have missed it, but really appreciate you guys being here today and yesterday. So I hope you have a great rest of your week. Oh, yeah. You can have that.
Oh, wait.
Pay that with me.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm coming around. Thank you. Sure.
Not on this one. This one's all done prior to